Fellow coders, in this episode we are going to discuss callback functions in JavaScript, what they are, and in which scenarios we need to use them. In JavaScript, a callback function is a function that is passed as an argument to another function and is executed after the completion of some operation. Callback functions are a fundamental concept in asynchronous programming, where operations can take some time to complete and you don't want to block the execution of the rest of your code while waiting for them. On the other hand, if you are familiar with some built-in array functions, such as filter, for each, map, and the others, you have already been using callback functions. Let's create a basic example to illustrate the concept. I'm going to define a function called doSomethingAsync to handle an asynchronous task. I'll use a setTimeout handler to introduce a 1-second delay. My goal is to print asynchronous task is completed to the console after 1 second. Now, once the asynchronous task is completed, I want another function, let's call it HelloWorldWriter, to be invoked and write Hello World to the console. If I attempt to call these two functions sequentially, my intention will fail. The reason why it fails lies in the JavaScript execution order. Functions containing promises or setTimeout will execute later than synchronous code parts. There are several concepts to address this issue, but we will use callback functions. I'll modify the doSomethingAsync function to accept a callback function as a parameter. This way, we can execute the HelloWorldWriter function once the setTimeout is completed. After running the script, it works. As expected, within the setTimeout handler, console.log asynchronous task is completed worked, and then the HelloWorldWriter function was invoked after the asynchronous task is completed output. Speaking of built-in array functions in JavaScript, as mentioned at the beginning of the episode, let's break it down. Let's define an array called students to store 3 objects with the key age. I want to filter the students array for ages between 15 and 20. To achieve this, I need to pass a callback function to the filter function. Here we go. It works. The filter function invokes our callback function with each instance of a student, which we define as an argument to be processed. In the filter function in JavaScript, the first parameter is always defined as the instance of each object in the array. Another common use of callback functions is to operate a bunch of tasks within the same function, eliminating the need for writing if-else statements. In this example, we are going to demonstrate very basic form validation using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. In case the name is submitted empty, we need to validate the submission by showing a pop-up to the user. Otherwise, the form can be submitted by calling the function sendAPI_request. Let's see how we can implement this functionality using callback functions. In the HTML layout, there is a simple form including an input for age and a button to submit the form. Next to it, there is a div I made for showing a pop-up containing buttons and other HTML elements. Elements in the layout are prepared without considering well-designed CSS, as we are only intended to focus on the JavaScript logic. To bind listener events to the HTML elements in the layout, I need to store them in constant variables one by one. To submit the form values, I will create a function called submitForm to be triggered on the submit button click. Here, to access name input, I'm using a constant variable to store the input element and then accessing its value using the value property of the HTML element. If the entered name is empty, I want to show a validation pop-up message to the user. Else, the form can be submitted by calling the function sendAPI_request. To do that, let's create a function called setPopup. Function setPopup needs to receive a message parameter to print the message in the pop-up. YesButton function to call in case the yes button is clicked as callback, and noButton function callback like I explained for YesButton. For the pop-up to be seen, we need to change the display property of the pop-up. Then let's set our message to the pop-up message element. To invoke yes and no functions in case corresponding buttons are clicked, the addEventListener function needs to be obtained for these button elements. addEventListener looks like a callback function, right? They are almost everywhere in JavaScript. Now we are done with the implementation of the setPopup function. Last but not least, let's call the function setPopup with the parameters that we need. As the first parameter, I will pass the message, "Are you sure to submit the form?" with an empty name. Second, the function needs to be executed in case the yes button is clicked in the pop-up, which is send API request. Third is the one in case the no button is clicked, which is close pop-up. Let's implement the function close pop-up by adding the style display property to be set to none. I will add a return statement here not to execute further parts of this function. In case the name is filled, then I want to call send API request. Let's see all this in action. Firstly, I want to enter a name in the input to verify if the function send API request is being called. There we go, it works. Now it's time to try the validation that we just implemented. Let's enter the name input empty, then click submit. Here we go. Our simple validation is asking if we are sure to submit the form with an empty name. Let's click yes, and the API request is sent as we can see it in the console. Let's trigger the validation again to test the close button. Here we go. The pop-up is closed without sending an API request. Great. In this example, maybe it's not crucial to use callback functions, but in the real world, handling pop-up messages for lots of different cases and different functions to be executed is quite important to be implemented with callback functions. Callback functions are a cornerstone of JavaScript's event-driven and asynchronous nature, and they play a crucial role in managing the flow of execution in programs that involve asynchronous operations. They are extensively used in libraries, frameworks, and APIs, allowing developers to write non-blocking and responsive code. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can support me by subscribing to my YouTube channel Coding Promised. You can also follow me on Instagram with the same name. See you soon.